Hi, this is a video on Start Best Practices. My name is Scott McCauley and I teach entrepreneurship at Red River College. There really has been a move in the last few years to do entrepreneurship, or teach entrepreneurship a lot better. What I have learned over the years is you can't teach entrepreneurship from a textbook. It's kind of like saying, can you teach risk-taking? We have figured out ways to reduce the risk that allows entrepreneurship to flourish. The best way to look at entrepreneurship is as a verb and not a noun. Then the near synonym is execution. Just do it. You'll hear that from entrepreneurs a lot. Entrepreneurs can be activated, and I hope you can be too. Before we go into entrepreneurship, let's talk about innovation, which is really underlies what entrepreneurship is all about, and doing things in an innovative way. And we're going to look at the innovation process very quickly. And where does innovation come from? 5 main ideas. Expertise. You need to be really good at something. You have to have this a problem, and there's a wonderment of how we can solve it. And bumping around, heads bumping of different experts, talking to each other, working with each other, bouncing ideas around, and then experimentation, trying different things, and leading to like a series of aha moments. It's not all one aha. It's actually a lot of little ones. A great example of we can see innovation in action. It comes from a movie called Riding Giants, and Laird Hamilton is a famous surfer who learned how, or innovated how to ride these big massive waves. And we're going to go through a quick step process. I actually stole this from Reg Litch, who's a fantastic professor at U of M who just passed away. Laird Hamilton grew up in the surf community, and he was born and raised in surfing. His father was a big time surfer, and he grew up in that kind of that space, and so he had was really good at surfing. And when you think about innovation, think about that skate park you might see at your local community center, and think of all those kids spending time, hours on hours, or maybe it was you in your youth, skateboarding. They're more likely to come up with a new way to do skateboarding rather than, let's say, your mother or your grandmother. Expertise is a requirement. Second, this idea that there's a problem out there that needs to be solved. In this case, it was riding giant waves. The problem was the bigger the wave, the faster it moved, and so these big waves were moving incredibly fast, and you couldn't swim into the waves you saw in surfing. And there's Laird and his friends were sitting there. Is there a way to do this? How could we ride these big waves? And there was this long process that we're going to see that they went and did it. And Laird and his friends would go and try other things, and they'd bounce around ideas, and they go to windsurfing, and they get on big waves with windsurfing, but there's no freedom with the big sail, the windsurfer. And they started playing around with wakeboarding and towing in and kind of like surfing on surfing in some ways with being towed by a boat. And they put that together with this idea of being pulled by in this case, a little boat, getting fast enough to be towed into the wave so they can get on it. The problem was getting on the wave, and they also were playing around with snowboarding, and this idea of the waves are so fast, you need a smaller board and need to strap in because it was just so fast. And so you put together all these aha moments with the tow and surfing, with the jet ski, the shortboard, and the strap-in for the feet, and you have them now surfing on these massive waves. And so keep innovation at the back of the mind, because it's important to being an entrepreneur is to try innovative things. Starting at what is an entrepreneur. Michael Gary's a local entrepreneur and part of the big entrepreneurship community. This sounds a little complicated, but if you really think about it, it's not. An entrepreneur is someone who searches and experiments with opportunities to capture margin. Go and look for spots, putting things together, putting that piece of innovation or this technology with that, and hey, we can capture margins. Margins, of course, are the difference between price and what you sell it for. A second great quote comes from Reid Hoffman, who found it on LinkedIn, and this idea of you jumping off a cliff and you assemble a plane on the way down. And the approaching ground gets you very focused. We'll see that entrepreneurs have a bias for action, and jumping off. When we say someone's jumped off the cliff, that means they've kind of committed to an entrepreneurial lifestyle. Some of the characteristics of entrepreneurs: First and foremost is a bias for action. Your bureaucrat doesn't like change, but the entrepreneur just goes and does. There's this, if we don't move now, we're not going to make it, and they're always competing, and so there's always a bias. Entrepreneurs are great learners and great searchers. You might see a lot of the big millionaires or billionaires like Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates who quit schooling and moved into entrepreneurship. They were such good learners that they didn't need the institution of the university. And all the really great entrepreneurs figure things out for themselves, and they're always looking for the new ways to do things. They're naturally curious. How does that work? And then we move on to this idea of entrepreneurs I know. Maybe it's not like a cognitive or good at doing tests, but they're incredibly competent people. They're good speakers. They have a curious mind, and they're very competent people. And that competence leads to a confidence that leads to that risk tolerance. And you can't really peg any, let's say demographic for entrepreneurs. It's a big spectrum on that. Entrepreneurial thinking is the idea of solving problems. Entrepreneurial thinking is how can we fix this thing, and seeking new solutions and opportunities. This idea of looking for problems and seeing problem solutions rather than ways we can't do things. This idea of a startup, and it's one word. I love that. If you type it in, it doesn't come up an error anymore in Microsoft Word. But a startup is a temporary organization designed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model. So it's basically an entrepreneur in search mode. Like a startup is trying to figure out your business model that's going to work for you, and it is search. There's a whole category or a whole kind of library of lean startup sources. Steve Blank, Eric Ries, Alec Osterwald, Guy Kawasaki, a whole bunch of stuff that you hopefully after this can go onto YouTube and just start typing some of those names and just watch the YouTube videos and just spend hours doing that. Why build a startup? Best time in history right now to be an entrepreneur. Costs are falling, barriers are being destroyed. Disruption and change are everywhere. The CEOs aren't afraid of the competition. They're afraid of those two entrepreneurs in the garage who are coming up with something totally different. Another reason for start, make a dent in the world. Do something. Build an organization of lasting value. From a local standpoint, youth unemployment rate is up, and guess where all the jobs are coming? They're coming from self-employment. That's the entrepreneur. So it's a great time to be an entrepreneur. So let's take a look at some of the old views on entrepreneurship. And in the good old days, this idea you'd have we should do a something business, and that would lead to a strategy that you put together in a business plan, and then you'd execute on it. Another good way to look at it, and I believe in this one, is this idea that entrepreneurs are always looking to reduce risk. And the more you reduce the risk, the more you're likely to jump off the cliff. And so a team risk, you might bring in, someone who has a certain skill set that you don't have. Go and get capital through a lot of different sources we're going to look at. Figuring out the market and technology, maybe something new. Steve Blank and this idea of customer development we're going to look at in a second. This idea is, go get in front of a customer as soon as possible and ask them, well, do they like this? Will they buy this? As opposed to building a business plan, building out a big storefront, and then open it up for business and no one shows up. And I've seen that a lot of times, and we just don't do that anymore. Another way to look at it is entrepreneurship is this race against time to create value and reduce risk. It's where that bias comes from action. It's just we've got so much time before we're going to run out of time and money. And then the flip here is after you get into lean startup is and what we're going to show you is get in front of customers right away. Start selling right away. Get learning from the market and from people who know things. So execute right away. That will lead to a strategy. That will lead to your vision of what your business is. Kind of at the foundations of lean startup, this idea of stop wasting people's time by building these big, thick business plans that have never been tested, never had sales, never had someone said this will work. And I've seen this so often. And you might see if you watch Dragon's Den, always the first question they ask is, what are your sales? What's your proof? And in the startup world is, what's your validation? Who says this will work? The old way was the business plan, and this idea, the old paradigm, research your idea, then write a business plan. And if you talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, they'll say, yeah, we're on version number 9, or someone in startup mode should be saying, my business plan changes every day, because you're learning every day, and that's what entrepreneurs do. They search and they learn. A lot of people I've had argues with about business plans that they should write one, and they actually are they're educators and entrepreneurs, and they ask them if they've actually written one. They said, well, no. Or some guys say, well, I've done it with the finances least. Startups are not smaller version of large companies. Larger companies do business plans. Startups don't, because the business plan is for an entrepreneur. The business plan for an entrepreneur in search mode changes every day, so we don't write them. And this is a little extreme, but writing the business plan states you have no more to learn. And there are some pros to business plans. It's a proof that you've thought about your business. Bottom line is, if eventually when you go to get government support and let's say debt from financiers, they want a business plan. You're going to be producing 1 or 10 of them. The Lean Startup Toolkit. So Lean Startup comes out of Silicon Valley, and it's a series of tools that we're going to show you right now. We're going to probably get through about 10 of these, and just little tools to make life easier for you as a startup, to build structure around your entrepreneurial lifestyle and your entrepreneurial career. First off, this idea of identifying the pain. You want to build your business around a problem that needs fixing. You don't want to solve solutions of things where there's no need. So you want to go and looking for pain points. Talk to customers and saying, how would you want it, or why do you want it? What's the unmet need? There is one I call it the Steve Jobs exception, and we'll talk about that a little later. A startup is about experimentation, trying out new things, searching. One of the first tools we have that starts that search is the Business Model Canvas. This idea that every business has a unique business model, and the Business Model Canvas is a great tool for getting it on paper, at least your first thoughts about what your business is going to be. And I'll let a video describe what the Business Model Canvas is.
An organization's business model can be described with 9 basic building blocks: your customer segments, your value proposition for each segment, the channels to reach customers, customer relationships you establish, the revenue streams you generate, the key resources and key activities you require to create value, the key partners, and the cost structure of the business model. But it's not sufficient to just enumerate the 9 building blocks. What you really want to do is to map them out on a pre-structured canvas. This is what we call the Business Model Canvas, a tool that helps you map, discuss, design, and invent new business models. Let's briefly go through the 9 building blocks, starting with the customer segments. These are all the people or organizations for which you're creating value. This includes simple users and paying customers. For each segment, you have a specific value proposition. These are the bundles of products and services that create value for your customers. The channels describe through which touchpoints you're interacting with customers and delivering value. The customer relationships outline the type of relationship you're establishing with your customers. The revenue streams make clear how and through which pricing mechanisms your business model is capturing value. Then you need to describe the infrastructure to create, deliver, and capture value. The key resources show which assets are indispensable in your business model. The key activities show which things you really need to be able to perform well. The key partners show who can help you leverage your business model, since you won't own all key resources yourself, nor will you perform all key activities. Then once you understand your business model's infrastructure, you'll also have an idea of its cost structure. So with the Business Model Canvas, you can map out your entire business model in one image. This works for startup entrepreneurs just as well as for the most senior executives.
The important thing to remember about Business Model Canvas, it's one of the first places you go, but it's an iterative process. That means it has many versions of it, and you should update your Business Model Canvas every time you learn something new. And so you should have, as you go along, over the first few months, you should have 6 or 7 of these Business Model Canvas. You can Google Business Model Canvas and download them. What's important for a young person starting up is you don't need a lot of money to become a startup entrepreneur. And the idea is we don't want you spending a lot of money on it. Figure out a business model that you don't need a lot of money to start there. Go sell something at a farmer's market. You see Nick there, right there, literally selling cables at a farmer's market. Build a product at AscentWorks. If you can't figure out how to make a buck off a laser printer, you're not trying. Build a website, and that website would be like wireframe. Just a first few screenshots. And just recently, Portage Place and through Small Business, this Downtown Biz opened up Launch It, which is like a incubator and pop-up for retail. So if you're thinking of a retail shop, instead of spending tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars on a storefront, do it for literally almost nothing at Launch It, and get in front of customers and start selling. See how do they want it? Are they tall? Are they short? They want red and blue. They want spend this much or that much. It's an experimentation. Don't fall in love with your first idea, because it makes it difficult to continue exploring. You have to be flexible somewhat. And prototyping, this idea of continually trying out new things, having that first thing, and it's how you have a conversation with your ideas of how you're going to go forward with it. So get that minimal viable product or your prototype in front of someone and who's a customer, who's an informed expert, and see how it works. Don't worry about financing right now, but there is a financing model for startups. We're talking about between $1,000 to $3,000 money right off the bat. And this idea, it's enough that you lose it all. It's not the end of the world, but it's enough to get you out of bed every day and get excited about that. Once you get moving, we'll have you start working on your Young Entrepreneur Grant, which is a money straight from the government as a grant, and then we can start looking at your COBF loan, and there's other styles of loans that you can get up to $70,000 very quickly. And then government stuff and angel investors comes later in the day. Customer development is this idea of getting in front of your customer idea, and this idea that go talk to a customer, go talk to an informed investor and say, will you buy this? And if they say no, you ask why. And either you get validation from them or you try something new. And that's what we call a pivot. It was when you put something in front of a customer or an expert and they say that won't work for this reason, but if you did it this way, I would buy it, or I'd agree to it. That's a validation, and the pivot is if you try it a different way. That you move. We call them iterations or smalls and ones, and pivots are big ones. And sometimes when I've seen guys like, okay, the world is we're not working. It's something's really wrong. The way we're thinking about it, it doesn't work. And then they start working around ways to figure out. In retrospect, those failures were actually the pivots that really made their business work. And we could talk a lot about that. Entrepreneurship is a search process, and the idea is to search process that must find the business idea that is repeatable and scalable. Repeatable means you can just not sell one of them, but many times over. And scale means we want you to grow big. Lifestyle entrepreneurs are fine, but they're not going to produce jobs in our economy, and we're looking for scalable business ideas that build big companies. This idea of your network provides your education, and this, people who are not involved in the startup community, and you say, hey, what's your business idea? Oh, I can't tell you. And that's like, okay, go away. This idea of the startup community really has this belief that it's your idea, no one's going to steal it from you, and if they do, they're blackballed for life. So you should talk to anyone who can give you informed feedback. Go people who are knowledgeable in what you're working on. The competitive advantage is not I have a good idea and others don't, but rather get your idea in motion. Your competitive advantage is you're moving and adjusting the right network, and that's your competitive advantage, that you're assembling your network. And that's really important, going to talk to people, listening, being a good learner, going and just get out, and we call them hustling. We need to hustle and find out good ideas by talking to a lot of different people. A pivot, when you change, in basketball, is when you change direction, but you stay grounded in what you've learned. And the idea is you want to reduce the time between pivots before you run out of time and money. So you want, this idea is called failed fast. If it's not going to work, you want to know that right away so you can move on to a different version of it, or a different, a different idea before you waste a year writing big business plans and big, building a lot of something out of money. We want you to fail fast, and we want you to pivot real quick. This comes from Steve Blank, this idea that you get a hypothesis, an idea that comes from your business model canvas. Get in front of the customers. Discover it. Will they buy it? Get validation. If it doesn't work, pivot. Try something new. And pivots are the result of hypothesis testing and experimentation. and that's how you do that. So again, phase one, state the hypothesis, draw the business model canvas, test the problem by getting in front of experts, go to a farmer's market, whatever it is you need to get in front of customers. Then either validate it or pivot, and then you start working on execution, and then go back to drawing your business model canvas. As founders, and that's what startup guys are, they're founders. What you can do, as you get in motion, you can change the product, you make pivots, hear customers' feedback firsthand. You need to be doing that as the founder. One other note, this idea of flexible persistence is a little confusing, but entrepreneurs are given these two contradictory ideas that you need to keep focused, and on the other hand, you got to be adaptive. You have to listen to customer market feedback constantly, and it's a fine line. Sometimes you can have too many people talking to you, and too many mentors, and I call it mentor creep or feature creep, where you get too unfocused and you lose focus. You do need to keep that focus on really what you're doing, but at the same time be ready to change if you really notice something, and that's part of being an entrepreneur. Off topic a little bit, but this idea of lean startup is listen to the customer, and the counter argument to that comes from Apple, who, if you look at your iPhone in your pocket, Johnny Ives, he was the senior VP of design at Apple, and he says it's not the consumer's job to imagine what the future could be. New technologies and new processes afford innovation. And this idea, going back there, is if you're aware of new technologies, new processes, you can build something that no one's ever seen before. And when we take you on the, let's say, the startup bus crawl, you're going to see all these new processes, new inventions that you can do really cool stuff with and put it in front of customers. So the push of innovation comes from lean startup, and the pull comes from this idea of check this out, this new piece of innovation, this new piece of technology that they didn't know they want. You didn't know you want your iPhone, but check this out. It's a great way to go. There's this idea of, instead of writing a business plan, you want to weave a mat, and so this idea you need to build structure into your entrepreneurial life. And the first is build milestones. Build a prototype. First customer validation. When are you going to get revenue positive? And we want to get revenue positive as soon as possible. And so that you want to build some structure in there with milestones. And the assumptions and tasks are this idea of what are all the things we have to figure out, and what do we have to test to make sure that this business is going to work. And the tasks are all the things you got to do to accomplish a milestone or test an assumption. Also important to think about is partnering up, mentoring up, and joining the community. Find a complementary partner that with your skill sets that you need for your startup. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're doing something with design or technology, partner up with someone who has that skill set. And you want to partner up with the best people. A players partner up with A+ players, and B players hire C, C players hire D, and so on, before you have an organization of people who are not the greatest. Next, find mentors you can learn from. Someone in the same industry a couple of years ahead of you. These are the most important people in your world, and really important. We can connect you with the mentors. And get into the community, and we'll talk about that later on, but there is a big startup community, and you see the same faces over and again, and you're going to find out the startup community is very supportive. And if you're going to find out the startup community, it's about helping each other out. Cooperate locally, compete globally. Next, this idea, I just want to kind of leave you before we go too much further, this idea of a local, someone who's on the startup bus crawl last year, and we came up with this idea of how do you make it easy for an entrepreneur to become, or I'd say a young student to become an entrepreneur. And I'm going to use the example of Nick Danzinger. He was on the startup bus crawl, and he met a lot of the people in his life now during the crawl, and he got a desk. He sat down. He said, I graduated from university. I'm going to sit down at desk, and he had about 18 ideas, and we focused it down to 2, and then he's one, and he was working initially on setting up or building a website to sell cables, because he worked at a computer shop where they sold computers, and he knew that the computers, very low margins, but the cables were really high margins, and we love big juicy margins, and so entrepreneurs look for margin. He sell the cables online, and that's what DigiPlus became. And he literally went out to the farmer's market and he learned who, like he followed the playbook, and he started selling this stuff, and he started selling cables and cell phone covers, and he learned who his customers were, what they bought, and he was selling cell phone covers, and he worked hard. This is Nick at lunch. I took a picture when everyone was the Ramp Up co-work space. This is where you guys will probably be one day, and he was there at lunch. He worked hard, and when the other guys were out, you could see him there dawn to dusk. An interesting thing happened is Ramp Up happens to be beside AscentWorks, and AscentWorks has $2 million worth of digital tools, and there's a laser cutter out there that someone showed them you could etch anything onto the cell phone cover, and so a bit of technology, affording innovation, and so Nick kind of put selling cell phone covers with customized cell phones, and DigiPlus started to expand on what they did, and then he took it to the next level. Talk about scaling up, and look, a scalable business idea. He said, why can't we put a laser cutter in every Keyman engravable or whatnot, in the malls, and having software allows you to do your own customized cell phone covers, and that's what DigiPlus was. And then you get a little better at it, some expertise, started playing around with it, talked to a lot of people who were doing it, and he got very good at it. And then he started pitching it to other people and listening to people, and he won awards on it. And Nick is also moving on to Bloater, which is one of his another website that has something to do with Twitter that we won't talk about here. The last point I want to talk about, this idea that comes from the movie The Matrix. And Morpheus put two pills in front of Neo, and he said, you can take the blue pill, the story ends, you wake up your own bed, and you believe whatever you want to believe. And that's the idea of going back to cubicles, but we want you to take a chance on yourself and jump into being an entrepreneur for a few months. Get a desk at Ramp Up, or become an AscentWorks member, or a few other different things you can go into, and take that red pill, where you stay in Wonderland and you go down that rabbit hole. And the rabbit holes are the Ramp Ups and the Retail Incubator and AscentWorks. I hope you come down the rabbit hole.